They told her he would hurt her. Her stepmother had delighted in the details. The Lichen King was a monster, she'd said, a beast who tore through brides like paper. The last 3 women sent to him had returned broken, or hadn't returned at all. He was ancient, savage, incapable of mercy. But don't worry, her stepmother had smiled, cold and satisfied. I'm sure he'll tire of you quickly. If you're lucky, you'll only lose a few fingers. Ivy had stopped listening after that. There was no point in arguing, no point in begging. Her father was dead, her inheritance stolen, and she was nothing more than an inconvenience to be disposed of. Sending her to the Lichen King as a tribute bride solved 2 problems at once. It fulfilled the territory's obligation and eliminated the stepdaughter who knew too many secrets about forged wills and poisoned tea. So here she was, standing in the great hall of Blackwood Castle, still in her travelling clothes, trying not to shake as the massive doors groaned open. He entered like a shadow given form, tall, broad, dark hair streaked with silver at the temples, a face that could have been carved from granite, hard jaw, sharp cheekbones, eyes the colour of a winter storm. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, and every instinct Ivy possessed screamed at her to run. She didn't run. There was nowhere to go. The Lichen King stopped 10 feet away from her, his gaze sweeping over her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She forced herself to stand straight, to meet his eyes, to not give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. If she was going to die, she would die with dignity. "You're the tribute from the Eastern Territory," he said. His voice was deep, rough, like stones grinding together. "Ivy Ashford." "Yes, Your Majesty." "Look at me." She was looking at him, but she understood what he meant. Really look, not just the defiant glance she'd been managing. She lifted her chin and stared directly into those storm-grey eyes. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or curiosity. "They told you I was cruel," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "They told you I would hurt you." "Yes." "And yet you're not cowering, not begging." He tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "Why?" Ivy's hands were trembling at her sides, but she kept her voice steady. "Because begging wouldn't help. If you're the monster they say you are, you'll hurt me regardless. And if you're not—" She faltered, then forced herself to continue. "Then I'd rather find out standing on my feet than grovelling on my knees." Silence stretched between them. The great hall was empty, except for the 2 of them, and Ivy could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Then the Lichen King did something she didn't expect. He laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh, not mocking or cold. It was genuine, startled, like she'd surprised it out of him against his will. The sound transformed his face, softening the harsh lines, making him look almost human. "You have courage," he said when the laugh faded. "That's rare in the brides they send me." "The other brides?" Ivy heard herself say. "What happened to them?" His expression shuttered. "They were sent home. My stepmother said they came back broken, or didn't come back at all." "Your stepmother lied." He took a step closer, and Ivy fought the urge to retreat. "I sent them home because they were terrified of me, because they flinched every time I moved, wept every time I spoke, and made it clear that they would rather die than remain in my presence." His jaw tightened. "I am many things, but I am not a man who keeps unwilling women in his bed." Ivy stared at him, trying to reconcile his words with everything she'd been told. "Then why does everyone say—" Because fear is useful. He turned away, moving toward the massive fireplace that dominated one wall of the hall. A king with a reputation for cruelty has fewer enemies willing to test him, fewer territories thinking they can send him damaged goods as tribute and get away with it. He glanced back at her. What did your family hope to gain by sending you? The question cut close to the bone. Ivy swallowed hard. My father died 6 months ago. My stepmother inherited everything. Illegally, but she has powerful friends. I was inconvenient. So they sent you here to die. Or to suffer enough that I'd never dare challenge them. Another long silence. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows across the stone walls. Come with me, the king said finally. Ivy's heart lurched. Where? To your chambers. You've been traveling for 3 days. You need food, rest, and a bath. We can continue this conversation tomorrow. My chambers? She'd expected a cell, a dungeon. The monster's bed at worst. He turned to face her fully, and something in his expression made her breath catch. You are a guest in my home, Ivy Ashford. Not a prisoner. Not a possession. A guest. He extended his hand toward the door. If you want to leave tomorrow, I'll arrange safe passage anywhere you wish to go. But tonight, you stay here. You eat. You sleep in a warm bed. And you learn that not everything you've been told about me is true. She should have been suspicious, should have waited for the trap to spring. But she was exhausted, starving, and something in his voice made her want to believe him. She walked toward the door on shaking legs. He fell into step beside her, not touching, not crowding, just a solid presence at her shoulder as he led her through torch-lit corridors and up winding stairs. The castle was vast and ancient, but it wasn't cold. Tapestries lined the walls. Fireplaces burned in every room they passed. It felt less like a monster's lair and more like a home. They stopped before a heavy oak door. These are your rooms, he said. There's food waiting inside, and a bath being drawn as we speak. The door locks from the inside. He met her eyes. You're safe here, Ivy. I give you my word. Why should I believe you? You shouldn't. Not yet. Something that might have been sadness flickered across his face. But by morning, perhaps you'll have a reason to. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the corridor. Ivy stared after him for a long moment. Then she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was beautiful, warm, a fire already burning, a tray of food on the table, a massive bed piled with furs. Through an archway, she could hear water being poured into a copper tub. She locked the door, tested it twice. Then she sat down on the edge of the bed and let herself shake. Everything they'd told her was wrong. Either that, or this was the cruelest game imaginable. Give her hope, give her comfort, then snatch it away. She didn't know which possibility frightened her more, but as she ate the warm bread and rich stew, as she sank into the hot bath and scrubbed away 3 days of travel, as she climbed into the softest bed she'd ever touched and pulled the furs up to her chin, one thought kept circling in her mind. He'd looked at her like she was a person, not a tribute, not a victim, not a thing to be used and discarded. A person. She fell asleep, still trying to understand what that meant. Ivy woke to sunlight streaming through windows she hadn't noticed the night before. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The bed was too soft, the room too warm, the silence too peaceful. Then memory crashed back. The journey, the castle, the king who hadn't hurt her, and she sat up so quickly her head spun. She was still here, still alive, still unharmed. A knock came at the door, soft and hesitant. "My lady," a woman's voice. "The king has requested your presence at breakfast, if you're willing. I've brought clothes for you." Ivy climbed out of bed on unsteady legs and crossed to the door. She unlocked it, still locked, just as she'd left it, and opened it a crack. A middle-aged woman stood in the corridor, holding a bundle of fabric. She had kind eyes and a gentle smile that put Ivy slightly at ease. "I'm Helena," the woman said. "The king's household manager. May I come in?" Ivy stepped back to let her enter. Helena laid the clothes on the bed, a simple but well-made dress in deep blue, along with undergarments, stockings, and soft leather boots. "These should fit. The king thought you might appreciate something clean after your journey." She paused, studying Ivy's face. "You look surprised." "I expected a cell, or chains, or—" Ivy stopped herself. "I'm not sure what I expected." "Not kindness, I imagine." Helena's expression softened. "The stories they tell about His Majesty in the Outer Territories are exaggerated, deliberately so. He's not what they say he is." "Then what is he?" "That's for you to discover." Helena moved toward the door. "Breakfast is in the small dining room, down the stairs and to the left. Take your time." She left Ivy alone with the clothes and more questions than answers. The dress fit perfectly. Ivy tried not to think about how he'd known her size, tried not to think about how much attention he must have paid to notice. She braided her hair simply, splashed water on her face, and forced herself to walk out the door. She found the dining room without difficulty. It was smaller than she'd expected, intimate almost, with a table set for two and windows overlooking a snow-dusted garden. The king was already there, standing by the window with a cup in his hand. He turned when she entered, and something in his expression eased. "You came. You asked me to. I gave you a choice. That's different." He gestured to the table, laden with more food than she could eat in a week. "Please, sit. Eat." She sat because her legs were shaking. He took the chair across from her, close enough to talk, but not close enough to touch, giving her space, letting her breathe. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Better than I have in months." "Good." He pushed a plate of pastries toward her. "Eat something. You're too thin." "My stepmother didn't believe in wasting food on unwanted stepdaughters." The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. Ivy reached for a pastry to cover her embarrassment, but not before she saw the flash of anger in his eyes. "Tell me about her," he said quietly. "Your stepmother." "Why?" "Because I want to understand what was done to you, and by whom." Ivy chewed slowly, buying time. She didn't talk about her family, didn't talk about the years since her father's death. The slow starvation, the endless cruelties, the way she'd learned to make herself small and quiet and invisible just to survive. But something about the way he was looking at her made the words spill out. "She married my father for his money. He was sick by then, too weak to see what she really was. She convinced him to change his will, and when he died, everything went to her." Ivy's hands tightened on her cup. "I was 16. I had nothing. No money, no allies, no power. She kept me around as a servant. Better than throwing me out," she said, "because at least this way she could keep an eye on me." "Keep an eye on you?" "I knew things. About how my father really died. About the documents she forged." Ivy's voice dropped. "She was afraid I'd talk, so she made sure I understood what would happen if I did." What would happen? Ivy didn't answer, but her hand drifted unconsciously to her ribs, where the scars from a particularly brutal lesson still ached in cold weather. The king went very still. She hurt you. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me. His voice had gone low and dangerous, the roughness sharpening into something that sounded almost like a growl. Everything that was done to you matters to me. Ivy looked up, startled by his intensity. Why? You don't know me. I'm just another tribute bride, a problem to be dealt with. You're not a problem. He set down his cup with careful precision, like he was restraining himself from breaking something. And you're not just another tribute. You're... He stopped, jaw tightening. I'm what? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he let out a breath and met her eyes. When you walked into my hall last night, I knew. The moment I caught your scent, I knew what you were to me. Ivy's heart stuttered. What are you saying? I'm saying that fate has a cruel sense of humor. I've spent 200 years alone, convinced I would never find my mate. And then your stepmother, in her attempt to destroy you, delivered you directly to my door. A muscle feathered in his jaw. You're my mate, Ivy. My true mate. The one person in this world I'm meant to be with. The pastry fell from her fingers. That's impossible. I wish it were. It would make this easier. Make what easier? Letting you go. He rose from his chair and moved to the window, putting distance between them. I told you last night that you could leave. That offer stands. I won't force a mate bond on someone who doesn't want it, who was sent here against her will, who has every reason to hate and fear me. But if I'm your mate, then losing you will hurt more than anything I've ever experienced. He said it flatly, without self-pity. A simple statement of fact. But I've lived with pain before. I'll survive. Ivy stared at his back, trying to process what she was hearing. The cruel king who wasn't cruel. The monster who was offering her freedom. The mate bond she'd never expected and didn't know how to want. Why are you telling me this? She asked finally. He turned to face her. Because you deserve the truth. All of it. So you can make an informed choice about what happens next. What are my options? Leave today, and I'll send you somewhere safe with enough gold to start a new life. Stay, and I'll court you properly. No expectations, no demands. Just time for us to know each other, to see if what fate has decreed is something you might actually want. And if I don't, want it, I mean, then I let you go, and I spend the rest of my very long life knowing that I had everything I ever wanted within reach and couldn't keep it. The rawness in his voice made her chest ache. This wasn't a monster. This was a man. Ancient and powerful and terrifying, yes, but also lonely. Also wounded in ways she was only beginning to understand. I don't know what I want, she admitted. I've never been allowed to want things. Something softened in his expression. Then perhaps it's time you learned. He returned to the table, sitting across from her again, closer this time, but still not touching. Stay, he said quietly. Not forever, just for a while. Let me show you who I really am beneath the stories, and let yourself discover what you want when wanting is finally allowed. Ivy looked at this man, this king, this supposed monster, who was asking instead of taking, who was offering choices she'd never had before. She should have been afraid. She was afraid. But she was also, for the first time in years, curious. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. For now. The smile he gave her was worth every moment of terror she'd endured to get here. 2 weeks passed. And Ivy learned that everything she'd believed was a lie. The Lichen King was not cruel. He was patient, thoughtful, and surprisingly gentle. He walked with her through the castle gardens, even when the snow fell thick and fast. He asked about her childhood, her mother who'd died when she was young, the father she'd loved and lost. He listened like her words mattered, like she mattered. He never touched her without permission, never raised his voice, never gave her any reason to fear him. It was disorienting. She kept waiting for the mask to slip, for the monster to emerge. But day after day, he remained exactly what he'd shown her that first night. A man, not a beast. A man she was beginning to trust. "You're staring," Kyle said one evening. They were in his study, a fire crackling in the hearth, snow swirling against the dark windows. He sat in an armchair with a book. She'd claimed the window seat with a cup of tea she'd forgotten to drink. "I'm trying to figure you out." "Any progress?" "Some." She set down the cold tea. "You're not what I expected. You're not what anyone expects." "Is that a good thing?" "I think so." She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "The reputation. The stories about your cruelty. You said they were useful, that fear keeps enemies away." She hesitated. "But there has to be more to it than that. No one builds a legend that dark without reason." Cale's expression flickered. He closed his book slowly, setting it aside. "You're perceptive," he said. "I should have expected that." "You don't have to tell me. I just know. You deserve to know." He rose from the chair and crossed to the fireplace, staring into the flames. 100 years ago, I was different, softer, more trusting. I believed that kindness could solve problems, that showing mercy to enemies would inspire loyalty. His jaw tightened. I was wrong. Ivy waited, barely breathing. There was a woman, a human noblewoman from a neighboring territory. I thought I loved her. I thought she loved me. His voice went flat. She was a spy. Her family sent her to learn my weaknesses, to find a way to destroy me from within. And I let her. I told her everything, my fears, my hopes, the people I cared about. I gave her every weapon she needed to break me. What happened? She used them, all of them. He turned to face her, and the pain in his eyes made her chest ache. She had my closest advisor assassinated, poisoned my sister, tried to start a war that would have destroyed my kingdom. A muscle jumped in his cheek. I stopped her, but not before she'd taken almost everything from me. Your sister survived, barely. She lives in the northern mountains now, away from court, away from danger. He exhaled slowly. After that, I rebuilt myself, made myself harder, colder, spread stories about my cruelty until no one dared get close enough to hurt me again. His eyes met hers. It worked. For 100 years, it worked. And now? Now you're here. And every instinct I've spent a century building is telling me to push you away, to protect myself, to not let anyone this close ever again. He took a step toward her. But I can't, because you're my mate, and because you're not her. You're nothing like her. Ivy unfolded herself from the window seat, standing to face him. How do you know? You barely know me. I know enough. Another step closer. I know you've been hurt, badly, repeatedly, and yet you're still kind, still brave, still willing to give a supposed monster the benefit of the doubt. His voice dropped. I know you flinch when people move too fast, but you haven't flinched away from me in days. I know you sing when you think you're alone. I've heard you. In the garden. In the halls. Your mother's songs, I think." Her eyes burned. "You heard that?" "I hear everything about you, Ivy. I notice everything. I can't help it." He stopped an arm's length away. "You asked me once why I care about what was done to you. This is why. Because you survived the same kind of betrayal I did, and it didn't break you. It made you stronger." "I don't feel strong." The admission slipped out before she could stop it. "I feel like I'm barely holding together. Like one more blow will shatter me completely." "Then let me hold you together." The words hung in the air between them. Ivy's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I've spent so long waiting for people to hurt me. I don't know how to stop waiting." "You don't have to stop. Not yet." He raised his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was feather-light, achingly gentle. "Be scared. Be cautious. Take as long as you need. I'll still be here." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why are you so patient with me?" "Because you're worth waiting for." He said it simply, like stating an obvious truth. "Because every day I spend with you makes me more certain that fate knew exactly what it was doing when it brought you to my door." "Because you are extraordinary, Ivy, and I will spend as long as it takes convincing you of that." A tear slipped down her cheek. He caught it with his thumb, wiping it away with a tenderness that made her want to weep. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," she said. "You existed. That was enough." She didn't know who moved first. One moment they were standing apart, and the next she was in his arms, her face pressed against his chest, his hand cradling the back of her head. He held her like she was precious, like she was wanted, like she was home. "I'm going to tell you something," she murmured against his shirt. "Something I've never told anyone." "I'm listening." "The night before I left, my stepmother came to my room. She said—" Ivy's voice faltered. "She said she hoped the Lichen King would destroy me, that she hoped he would break me into pieces so small that no one would ever remember I existed. She said it was what I deserved for being born." Kyle's arms tightened around her. She felt the growl building in his chest, low and dangerous. She was wrong. His voice was rough with barely contained fury. "She was wrong about everything. You deserve to be loved, Ivy. Cherished. Protected. You deserve someone who looks at you and sees treasure instead of trash." "Do you? See treasure, I mean?" He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. His gaze was intense, burning with something that made her breath catch. "I see the most remarkable woman I've ever met," he said. "I see courage and kindness and resilience. I see someone who was told she was worthless her entire life and refused to believe it. I see my mate, my future, my everything." His hand cupped her face. "I see you, Ivy. All of you. And I have never seen anything more beautiful." She rose up on her toes without thinking, drawn to him like a moth to flame. Their faces were inches apart, his breath warm on her lips. "Can I kiss you?" he whispered. She should have said no, should have protected herself, kept her walls up, remembered that trust was dangerous. Instead, she said yes. His lips met hers, soft and slow, a question rather than a demand. She answered by pressing closer, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt, her whole body alight with something she'd never felt before. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Cale rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he murmured. Not just for now. Stay forever. Ivy closed her eyes, feeling his heartbeat against her palm. She was falling. Falling fast and hard and completely. And for the first time in her life, she didn't want to stop. The messenger arrived 3 weeks later. Ivy was in the library when Helena found her, pale-faced and worried. "There's a delegation from the Eastern Territory, my lady. They're demanding to speak with the king." Ivy's blood went cold. "Who sent them?" "Lady Ashford, your stepmother." She should have known. Should have realized that her stepmother wouldn't simply let her disappear into the Lycan King's castle and live happily ever after. That woman had never let Ivy have anything good without trying to destroy it. By the time Ivy reached the Great Hall, Kale was already there, standing before the throne with an expression like carved ice. 3 men stood before him, her stepmother's enforcers, the same ones who'd held her down while her stepmother delivered her lessons. And behind them, dressed in silk and satisfaction, was Lady Miriam Ashford herself. "Ah, there she is." Miriam's smile was sharp as a blade. "My wayward stepdaughter. I've come to collect her." Ivy froze in the doorway. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to make herself small and invisible the way she'd learned to do. But Kale's eyes found hers across the hall, steady and fierce, and she forced herself to walk forward on legs that felt like water. "She's not yours to collect," Kale said. His voice was calm, but Ivy heard the danger underneath. "She came to me as a tribute. She's under my protection now." "Protection?" Miriam laughed, high and brittle. "Is that what you're calling it? I've heard the stories about what you do to your tribute brides, Your Majesty. The kingdom whispers about your cruelty, and now you expect me to believe you're protecting her?" "I don't expect you to believe anything. I don't care what you believe." Kale took a step forward, and 2 of the enforcers stumbled backward. "What I care about is why you're in my hall, wasting my time, when Ivy made her choice weeks ago." "Choice?" Miriam's eyes narrowed. What choice could she possibly have? She's a penniless orphan with nothing to offer. Unless... Her gaze swung to Ivy, sharp and calculating. "Unless you've been filling her head with fantasies, telling her she's special, making her think she matters." "She does matter." "She's worthless." Miriam spat the word like poison. "She's always been worthless. A burden I've carried for 4 years out of the goodness of my heart, and this is how she repays me? By running to a monster and pretending to be a queen." "I didn't run." The words came out of Ivy before she could stop them. "You sent me here. You hoped he would kill me. And instead he's made you his whore. How disappointing." Miriam's smile turned vicious. "But no matter. I'm here to fix this. To bring you home where you belong." "She belongs here." Kyle's voice had gone deadly soft. "With me." "She belongs to me." Miriam pulled a scroll from her sleeve and held it up. "I have documentation. Legal documentation proving that Ivy Ashford is my ward until she reaches the age of 25, or marries with my explicit consent. She's 20. I haven't consented. Therefore, she's still mine." Ivy's heart stopped. She knew those documents. She'd seen Miriam forge them years ago, along with her father's will. But they looked real. They had official seals, official signatures. No one would believe her if she claimed they were fake. "This is absurd," Kale growled. "This is the law." Miriam's confidence was nauseating. "Return my stepdaughter, or I'll bring this matter before the High Council. I'm sure they'd be very interested to hear how the Lycan King is keeping a young woman prisoner against her legal guardian's wishes." The hall went silent. Ivy could feel the trap closing around her, the same trap that had held her for 4 years. Documentation and legality, and the careful manipulation of people in power. She looked at Cale. His jaw was clenched, fury burning in his eyes, but she could see him calculating. He could fight this. He could tear Miriam apart right here and deal with the consequences later. But there would be consequences. Political fallout, questions about his judgment, ammunition for his enemies. She couldn't let him sacrifice that for her. "I'll go," she heard herself say. Both Cale and Miriam turned to stare at her. "Ivy," Cale started. "It's fine." Her voice was steady, even though her heart was breaking. "She's right. I'm legally her ward. I can't ask you to violate the law for me." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "Thank you for everything, for showing me what kindness looks like. I won't forget it." She started walking toward Miriam, every step an agony. This was how it ended then. A few weeks of happiness, a taste of what life could be, and then back to the prison she'd never really escaped. "Stop!" Cale's voice cracked through the hall like a whip. Ivy froze. "You said she's yours, until she marries without your consent." He crossed the hall in long strides, stopping directly in front of Ivy. "What if she marries with consent she doesn't need?" Miriam's smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" "Mate bonds supersede guardian rights. It's ancient law, older than whatever papers you've forged." Cale's eyes never left Ivy's face. "If Ivy accepts me as her mate, she becomes my queen, my family, and you become nothing." "She would never—" "Ivy." Kyle took her hands in his. His fingers were warm, steady, anchoring her to the ground when she felt like she might float away. "I was going to do this properly, candles and flowers and pretty words. But I'm not going to let her take you away from me, not when I've only just found you." Tears blurred her vision. "Cale, I love you." He said it simply, fiercely, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. "I love your courage and your kindness, and your stubborn refusal to break no matter how hard life tried to break you. I love that you gave a monster a chance to prove he wasn't monstrous. I love that you sing in the garden and cry at beautiful sunsets, and still flinch sometimes, but let me hold you anyway." "This is ridiculous," Miriam snarled. "She's a nobody. She can't be queen." "I love you," Kyle repeated, ignoring her completely. "And I'm asking you, not telling, not demanding, asking, to be my mate, my wife, my queen." His grip on her hands tightened. "Choose me, Ivy. Choose us. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right decision." Ivy looked at him, this man who had demolished every lie she'd ever been told about herself, who had shown her patience when she expected cruelty, kindness when she expected pain, love when she expected nothing at all. Then she looked at her stepmother, at the woman who had spent 4 years trying to destroy her, and who was now watching with dawning horror as her carefully constructed trap fell apart. The choice had never been simpler. "Yes," Ivy said. "I choose you. I love you. I'm yours." Kyle kissed her before she'd finished speaking, hard and desperate and triumphant, his hands cupping her face like she was something precious. She kissed him back with everything she had, pouring years of pain and hope and longing into that single moment. When they broke apart, she turned to face her stepmother. "I believe you were leaving," she said calmly. Miriam's face had gone purple with rage. "You can't do this. I won't allow—" "You have no authority here." Kyle's arm wrapped around Ivy's waist, anchoring her to his side. The woman you tried to destroy is now the Queen of Blackwood, and if you ever set foot in my territory again, I will personally ensure that everyone learns exactly what kind of monster you really are." His smile was cold and sharp. "Do you understand?" Miriam opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the three enforcers who were suddenly very interested in the floor. Then she turned and walked out of the hall without another word. Ivy watched her go, waiting for the fear to return. It didn't. "Are you all right?" Kyle murmured against her temple. She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had just upended his entire court to keep her. "I'm better than all right," she said. "I'm free." And for the first time in 4 years, it was true. The wedding took place 1 week later. Kyle had wanted to wait, to give her time to plan the ceremony she deserved. But Ivy had refused. She didn't need flowers or fanfare, or a dress that cost more than a house. She needed him. She needed the bond that would tie them together forever, that would make her his in every way that mattered. So they married in the castle garden, snow falling softly around them, with only Helena and a handful of trusted servants as witnesses. Ivy wore a simple white gown and her mother's locket. Kyle wore black and a smile that made her heart stutter every time she looked at him. The vows were traditional, but Kyle added his own words at the end. "They told you I was cruel," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "They said I would hurt you, break you, destroy you. Instead, you destroyed me. Every wall I'd built, every defense I'd constructed. You walked into my life expecting a monster, and you found a man who was waiting his entire life for someone brave enough to see him." Ivy's eyes burned with tears. "I was so afraid of you. That first night, I was certain I wouldn't survive until morning." "And now?" She reached up to touch his face, this face she'd learned to love. Harsh lines and silver temples, and eyes like winter storms. "Now I can't imagine surviving without you." He kissed her before the officiant finished speaking. No one complained. That night, in the king's chambers that were now hers too, Kale proved that his hands were made for gentleness. He touched her like she was sacred, whispered her name like a prayer, showed her what it meant to be wanted, truly, completely, overwhelmingly wanted. And when she woke the next morning wrapped in his arms, she didn't feel afraid. She felt cherished. She felt home. Word spread quickly. Within a month, every territory in the realm knew that the Lycan King had taken a bride. Not just any bride, but the discarded stepdaughter of Lady Miriam Ashford. The woman everyone had pitied, the girl everyone had forgotten, was now the most powerful queen in the land. The reactions were varied. Some nobles sent congratulations, eager to curry favour with the new queen. Others sent barely veiled insults, unable to believe that a penniless orphan could have captured the heart of the feared Lycan King. Ivy read every letter, good and bad, and filed them away for future reference. She was learning that being queen meant keeping track of who your friends were, and your enemies. The letter from her stepmother arrived 2 months after the wedding. It was addressed to Queen Ivy Blackwood, the title clearly written through gritted teeth, and filled with honeyed words about reconciliation and family bonds and letting bygones be bygones. Miriam expressed her deep joy at Ivy's good fortune and her sincere hope that they could put their differences behind them. She also mentioned, almost casually, that the Eastern Territory was facing financial difficulties, that certain debts were coming due, that a generous loan from the Crown would be so appreciated. Ivy read the letter twice. Then she walked to the fireplace and fed it to the flames. "Bad news?" Kyle asked from his chair, where he'd been pretending to read while actually watching her. Begging disguised as congratulations. Ivy watched the paper curl and blacken. She wants money and forgiveness, in that order. And what do you want? She turned to face him. I want her to know that she failed, that everything she did to me, every cruelty, every humiliation, every attempt to break me, it didn't work. I survived. I thrived. I became everything she said I could never be. Kyle rose from his chair and crossed to her. Then let's make sure she knows. The invitation went out the following week, a grand celebration to honor the new queen. Every noble family in the realm was expected to attend, including, explicitly, pointedly, Lady Miriam Ashford of the Eastern Territory. Ivy knew her stepmother would come. The woman was too proud to refuse, too desperate to miss an opportunity for royal favor. She would swallow her hatred and smile her false smile and pretend that she'd always believed in her stepdaughter's potential. And Ivy would make her choke on it. The night of the celebration, Ivy descended the grand staircase in a gown of midnight blue, a crown of silver and sapphires glinting in her dark hair. Cale waited at the bottom, devastating in formal black, his eyes never leaving her face. "You look like a queen," he murmured as she took his arm. "I feel like one." She smiled up at him. Finally. The great hall was packed with nobles, all of them watching as the Lycan king led his bride through the crowd. Ivy felt their eyes, heard their whispers, and let none of it touch her. She had spent her whole life being invisible. Tonight, she wanted to be seen. She found her stepmother near the refreshment table, clutching a wine glass with white-knuckled fingers. Miriam's face was a careful mask of pleasantness, but her eyes were burning with barely suppressed rage. "Stepmother." Ivy kept her voice warm, pleasant, perfectly queenly. "How good of you to come." "I wouldn't have missed it." Miriam's smile was brittle as glass. "You look... well?" "I am well. Better than I've ever been, actually." Ivy tilted her head, studying the woman who had made her childhood a misery. "How are things in the Eastern Territory? I heard there were some financial difficulties." Miriam's mask slipped, just for a moment. "Nothing we can't handle." "Of course. You've always been so resourceful." Ivy let the words hang in the air. "I remember how resourceful you were with my father's will, and his medicine, and all those documents you forged." The color drained from Miriam's face. "I don't know what you're—" "I know everything." Ivy stepped closer, lowering her voice so only her stepmother could hear. "I've always known. And now I'm queen, which means every secret you thought was buried is one royal investigation away from being exposed." She smiled sweetly. "Something to think about." She walked away before Miriam could respond, leaving the woman standing frozen with a wine glass trembling in her hand. Cale found her on the balcony an hour later, looking out at the moonlit gardens. "You're smiling," he observed. "I'm happy." She turned to face him, and the truth of it surprised her. Not just content, not just safe, genuinely deeply happy. "I spent so long believing I was worthless, that I didn't deserve good things, that people like me didn't get happy endings. And now? Now I have everything." She stepped into his arms, pressing her cheek against his chest. "A home, a purpose, a man who loves me despite knowing every broken piece of who I am." She looked up at him. "You proved them wrong, you know, that first night. Everyone told me you were cruel, and you proved them wrong in a single night." "I didn't prove anything." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You gave me the chance to show you who I really was. That took more courage than anything I've ever done. We saved each other then. We did. He kissed her forehead. And we'll keep saving each other. Every day. For the rest of our lives. 1 year later, Queen Ivy stood in the Great Hall, addressing a group of young women from across the realm. They were orphans, all of them. Girls with no families, no resources, no futures. Girls like she had been. You are not invisible, she told them. You are not worthless. You are not defined by what others have done to you or what they say about you. You are survivors, and this kingdom sees you. She'd started the program 6 months ago, a network of schools and training centers for orphaned girls, giving them the education and opportunities that she'd never had. It was her legacy, her purpose, her way of ensuring that no girl would ever feel as alone as she once had. After the girls were settled, Cale found her in their chambers, exhausted but glowing. "You were magnificent today," he said. "I learned from the best." She curled into his side on the settee. "Thank you." "For what? For seeing me when I was invisible? For being patient when I was afraid? For proving every terrible thing I'd been told about you wrong?" She pressed a kiss to his jaw. "For loving me." That part was easy. He pulled her closer. "Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done." She'd spent 20 years believing she was nothing, believing that cruelty was all she deserved, believing that monsters were real and kindness was always a lie. One night had changed everything. One man had changed everything. And now, wrapped in the arms of the king they'd warned her about, Ivy finally understood the truth. The real monsters weren't the ones with fearsome reputations and sharp teeth. They were the ones who smiled while they hurt you, the ones who called themselves family while they tried to destroy you. And sometimes, the person everyone warned you about was exactly the person you needed all along. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. Leave a comment telling me your favorite part, and I'll see you in the next one.